Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm your host, Paul McKeith, for our session, SUSE Linux Enterprise Server Upgrades and Migrations. So let's jump right in. Today's session, we have broken it down into 5 sections. First of all, we're going to talk about, maybe you're on a very old version of SLES, maybe SLES 8. Last year, someone was still running SLES 8 in production. Or you're an early version of SLES 12, but you might want to you decide, should I stick with it or move to the latest and greatest SLES 15? We'll give you some tips, tricks, and ideas on how to make a good decision around that. Then the perennial question, upgrade or fresh installation. Well, in that particular case, that's going to depend, but we'll give you, again, some ideas to make a good decision on that. Then you decide, I'm definitely going to go with the upgrade path. I'll pursue and show you all of the methods and the upgrade paths that you can take, and then go into a little bit deeper technical aspects of what that upgrade migration process would look like, along with some tips for it. And at the end of the appendix here, I've got our SLES support lifecycle, which you can go to the web as well, but it's here in a pretty format in case you want to use it. We won't cover that. It'll just be in here. On that note, throughout this presentation, we can't go into the technical detail that I'd like to in the time that we have allotted. So make sure you download this presentation, and in the PDF, there are going to be links to all of the supporting material for the things that we're talking about here today. So that will help you out tremendously. So make sure you do that. Okay, so our first section, do I go to 12 or do I do 15? Okay, so these are some general ideas of goals that most people have, right? Usually it's that first one there, the big one of maintaining support. Well, those first 3 bullet items there are really along the lines of things that you have to decide for yourself. It's going to be all things that are going to be impacted by your particular scenario. But what I want you to take away from that is that 4th bullet point. You are still going to be compatible no matter what you choose, 12 or 15. And if you stick with 12 and you just want to upgrade to the latest support pack and new things come out, we're going to keep you secure because of the backports. So we do what's called backporting, so that any security issues that come up with your distribution, we're going to take those things and put them in there. Now, that's going to be true as long as you're still under general support. So that's a key piece, right, in thinking about lifecycle, which we'll talk about in a little bit. However, if the other items that are on this list are a little bit more important to you than things like new OS features, hardware support, then there's some kind of layover between the two on this, but SLES 15 might be the way you're going to lean toward that. We'll go into details on that. And of course, everybody wants to minimize uncertainty to some degree. But sometimes that minimization of uncertainty might lead you to say, if it's not broke, don't fix it. The problem with that, of course, is that you're not going to secure it that way. And yes, I just told you you're going to be secured with backports. However, what we're talking about here are older versions of SLES. The older you go, the worse this will be. Well, things like TLS 1.2 are there, but the current versions of TLS are no longer supported in that particular version. And the same is true for early versions of SLES 12. You're going to want to make sure you're on the latest for that. So we talked about the life cycle as being an important factor. And so just rest assured that no matter what version you have, you start out with a 10-year commitment from SUSE to do all that backporting for you. Now, that's going to have a timetable on it. That 10 years still may not be enough. And so if you don't want to be this guy, we can still kind of help you out. Yes, I realize it's 2 different people in those 2 pictures, but best I could do. Sorry, guys. So what we're going to be able to do for you, though, is take that 10-year commitment that we've given you, and we can extend it. We can extend it to 13 years using this capability we call extended support. Extended support comes in 2 flavors. The first one is pretty commonplace. A lot of folks know of this one, and that's called LTSS, or Long-Term Service Pack Support. That's up to 3 years additional to the 10 years. At 1-year increments, you can extend support for SLES 11. That'll be SP4 because that was the last support pack. SLES 12, SP5, last support pack for SP4 12 is SP5, which has been released. And of course, ongoing with all the releases of SLES 15 and the support packs. And then SLES for SAP 11 SP4 as well. Now, the nice thing is that starting in SLES 12, that extra support for SLES for SAP is actually included. So it's not an optional product. It's included with every version of SLES 12 or every support pack of SLES 12 and SLES 15. So now you get 4.5 years of commitment from SUSE to keep you secure regardless of what support pack you're on, if you need to be into the LTSS. So we'll take care of you there. Now, let's say, okay, I am on an old version of 11. I don't want LTSS. I don't have SLES for SAP, what have you. Then you can consider SLES 12. Well, that's our first option. And of course, it is a big change, right? It's a major release, 11 to 12. So don't consider it just the next support pack. There's a lot of binary incompatibility with the two. There are a lot of new features that are quite a bit different. For example, Systemd, Btrfs, our file system, so that you can have snapshot rollback. Yes, there was some capability in SLES 11, late SLES 11 as well. However, really kind of tuned in and got really stable and great performance and great reliability, and our customers really liked it starting in SLES 12, so that will be there. And of course, a lot of older hardware things, CRUFT removed. We'll talk about that later in detail when we get into the upgrade choices. And of course, we get to fix our mistakes too. Yes, we do make mistakes too. So SLES 15, another major release going from 12. Yeah, don't ask me about where 13 and 14 went, but there is a good explanation for that. But SLES 15 is, again, very much like SLES 11 to 12, is a major release. However, they're a lot closer together. It's more of an evolutionary instead of a revolutionary change. So things like RiserFS, which was compatible in SLES 12, but now in SLES 15 no longer supported at all. So if you had a SLES 11 box, there's a hint, right, as far as which way you might want to choose upgrade or fresh installation or skipping 12 altogether. Then Systemd, another big kind of change that a lot of folks started to get used to in SLES 12. It was there as a compatibility or as a first step toward it, but Systemd now in SLES 15 is actually the default. We still have some legacy support for init scripts and things like that, so don't worry, it's not, cut and dry on you. Hardware support, I kind of hinted at that a little bit earlier, and I'm going to wait to deep dive into that when we get to the slides later in the upgrade section. Okay, now the other aspect is, are you on the bleeding edge or looking to be on the bleeding edge? And what I'm talking about here are things like containers, Kubernetes, software-defined infrastructure, the whole idea of DevOps and CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous development. Well, all of those are concepts and new ways of doing things that is more modern architecture, and SLES 15 is our foundation underneath all of those open source technologies that we also offer capabilities and support for. Something we don't talk about in this particular session, but it is kind of important. So if you're leaning that way, SLES 15 is probably a good way to go in terms of looking at that. Oh, and by the way, SUSE Manager 4, the current version of SUSE Manager, if you're using that, is also based on SLES 15. So another reason to kind of consider SLES 15. Okay, now let's look a little bit more details about your particular environment. So what kind of workloads are you running? Are they small? Yeah, quote unquote, like DNS or DHCP. I call them small because they're part of the distribution. We're going to take care of a lot of the heavy lifting for your upgrade processes for you. You're not going to have to do as much as, say, a big service like SAP or Oracle or other independent software vendors, software third parties that are on there. And then, of course, how long can the service be down? That actually may, make a decision for you in terms of which upgrade method you're going to use. No matter what, is your third-party software and the version you're using, is it supported on your target? SLES 12, SP5, hopefully, because that's the last one for 12. SLES 15, SP1's current. SP2 is coming out later this year, etc. But you're going to want to validate with those vendors as well. No matter what, consider or just understand that you probably are going to need some adjustment to the configuration of those if you're making the bigger change you make, like 11 to 12, 11 to 15. But if you're doing support packs, probably not quite as much. Okay, I promised we'd talk about hardware, so let's talk about hardware. So how old is it? Is it 32-bit on bare metal? Well, and you're probably going to want to change some things. Probably not. You're probably more virtualization these days. In the power space, big Indian and little Indian, these are going to be big kind of light switch choices for you that you're probably going to do fresh installation, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. What about old graphics cards? I was working with one customer where this was the case where everything was great. Everything was fine. They didn't have any concerns about security, but the bare metal hardware they have was really ancient and they no longer supported those graphics cards. And getting them to SLES 12 was going to be a difficult proposition for them, if not impossible, without help from the vendor. Things like token ring, I don't know that anybody, especially virtualization, still be using it, but you get the idea. There are older kind of technologies that are removed. Floppy disks, oddly enough, are still in there, but something you keep in mind. And then a big one here are disk controllers from independent hardware vendors. Make sure you check at that URL to make sure that you're certified if you're going to choose SLES 12 or 15. In fact, the choice for SLES 12 or 15 might be made by that determination alone. But perhaps you're upgrading your new hardware at the same time. That's often the case, especially if it's bare metal. Well, I kind of mentioned there, there's not a big difference between 12 and 15. And in fact, so close are they share the same kernel today. However, that's going to change and they're going to increasingly diverge over time. And what that really means is, the kernel is where all of the modules for your hardware support is going to go. So that's why that's really important. Things like something that's newer these days, the Intel Optane non-volatile DIMMs and the Cascade Lake and the AMD Rome processors, those are newer technologies. They're still supported in SLES 12. However, remember, in fact, it started in SLES 12 SP4, but in SLES 12 SP5, it's not going to get any more hardware support. So again, if you're looking forward to get the latest and greatest security because of all of these things or technologies, SLES 15 is probably you're going to lean that way as well. Okay, and again, there's the independent hardware vendor support to check your servers as well as your disk controllers. Make sure you check that out. And if you don't see your server there, don't worry, just nudge your vendor just a little bit because we're out there to help them and we work with them all the time. We have a very tight relationship with those vendors. It just may take them a little prioritization to get it in their certification list. Now, this one I'm not going to cover in depth, but basically you get the idea, how you built it in the past. You may not have had enough disk support, or you had enough back then, or you wish you would have done things a little bit differently, or now you really like Btrfs snapshots, but you would like to have more snapshot space available. And then all of a sudden you look and it says, wow, this is a lot bigger, took up a lot more space than I thought. And that might be because of the RPM cache. Kind of an interesting little tidbit. Okay. So just kind of a little bit of a summary and general considerations for choosing SLES 12 SP5 from our previous version of SLES 12 or support pack rev of SLES 12 or SLES 11 or previous or SLES 15. Well, this is where the life cycle is going to be maybe a linchpin is for you as well. So SLES 12 SP5 will reach its general support end of life at the end of October in 2024. But SLES 15 right now, it's got that 10-year commitment that we gave you. And this is both without the extra 3 years and without the SPOS for SLES for SAP. So that's 2028. So that one, both of these, you can go even further than that. And remember all that hardware stuff I told you about. Now, we have lots and lots and lots of customers. In fact, we're the predominant vendor that is operating system vendor underneath SAP workloads. And that's a link there that you can go to on this screen to give you some SAP notes to help you, guide you, because that can get a little complex depending on all the components you're using from SAP. And then again, check your ISV vendor as well if you're doing something like that. Okay, now I've done such a great job. You're saying, well, maybe I should consider SLES 15. Not sure about it though. Why don't we look at some highlights of SLES 15? So I'm not going to go into big detail, but remember, there are going to be quite a bit of changes. And this first bullet item is about the kernel itself. And in SLES 15 SP1, we're on the 4.14 kernel, same as SLES 12. However, in the next support pack for SLES 15, we're going to diverge, and we're going to go to the 3 kernel rev, and so that's going to continue to change. There's a new installation process in SLES 15. It's called the Unified Installer. It's going to look almost identical, so it's important that you understand the differences and what that will mean to you. And again, you can click on that link there for that 15 in order to get more information. I mentioned systemd we're making the next step on that. There is still some compatibility available to you, but you're going to want to move in that direction for sure because that is the future. Again, RiserFS is not supported, and there's some module changes. I'm going to get into this a little bit later. This is important, but I'll get into this in the upgrade section because that's when it's going to make the most difference to you. Here are a number of other packages and things that have been replaced or changed significantly in SLES 15. Again, you click on all of these links, it'll give you information. Probably the one I'd highlight the most in here is the OpenSSL 1.0x is now considered legacy. So if you want the older versions of that, not doing TLS 1.3, then you're going to want to do that to bring yourself backwards in security and compatibility. Now this one I'll highlight a little bit more. So in here, and I actually moved down to the bottom of this. I probably should have ordered this a little bit different. But the transactional updates capability that was introduced in SP1 of SLES 15 is in technology preview and should evolve in SP2. What it is a way for us to leverage Btrfs and also do a better job with the file placement of binaries and data so that the Btrfs snapshots that you have are only binary, that it only affects binaries, and you don't have to worry about configuration changes and getting in the way if you're going to do a rollback. And the fact that this is atomic is really nice, because what it means is if the support pack doesn't apply properly, we've got embedded health check scripts that are going to check and see if it went okay. And if it didn't, we'll automatically roll it back for you. You don't have to do anything. And you can also add in your own set of scripts that's extensible for you to add your own scripts, so you can add on to that as well. Just a quick note, remember I mentioned this is the foundation under the multimodal OS. Well, transactional updates actually came from that initiative in our container as a service platform solution. The CAS platform has this capability to do this for containerized applications in Kubernetes, for example. Okay? So that's not enough information for you to make a decision on SLES 15. Well, here at SUSECON, we have lots more information for you. So check out the hands-on. Yes, there's a virtual hands-on. There's even some VMs you can get and some demonstrations with some of my peers here from North America that you can check out at SUSECON. Want to see more detail about what's in SP2? Well, here's a session you can go check that out with the product manager. And if you want to dive right into the beta is live today. You can go do that, and you can get some more detailed information about what's in that beta from that link as well. And if you want to look even farther beyond that, looking at the future of the operating system, join Kai for that session, who's our outbound product manager for SUSE Linux Enterprise Server. Okay, so now you've made a decision, either 12 or 15, either one. And now, do I decide to do an upgrade, an in-place upgrade, or a fresh installation? Unfortunately, this one's going to be one where I can't give you the absolute decision on that one. You're going to have a lot of factors that we just talked about, for example, that are going to go into that decision. So the main thing I want you to concentrate, this is kind of your checklist to think about, but these last two items are the important ones that I want to point out. So how good is your current setup documented? If it's documented really well, it's a good candidate for a fresh installation. Now, there can be some good or bad. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Or if you things like, yeah, you set up differently back then, it made sense back then, or it didn't make sense back then, or somebody else had done it, you inherited it, maybe that's a good time to do a fresh installation, because you'll be able to undo those things or move forward. Okay, now if you've decided to, or you're still considering an upgrade, here are some other things you should consider. So one, a lot of old stuff is going to be left behind if you do an in-place upgrade. That could be good and that could be bad. But the bad part is that those things are no longer maintained. There's going to be a bunch of orphaned packages that slide in the upgrade process. We'll go into a little more detail on that and talk about that then. But they're going to be left behind. That could be good because you want to still use them, but maybe not. Some things like you may have some package conflicts, like the pluggable power supply or the power management on your hardware might become an issue or a conflict there. So you got to be careful of things like that and watch out for it. No matter what, you probably are going to have some package configuration changes, even if it's a support pack upgrade on SLES 12. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. It's not a lot, but we will. And again, that adjustment I mentioned earlier, and some packages that you have, or even scripts that you built, may be referencing that old stuff. So that's something else you want to watch out for. And we even have some tips on helping you with that as well. Okay. If you're using some of the database capabilities in the distribution like Postgres or MySQL, MariaDB, then depending on what version you're on, there is a process for that. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. We've talked about RiserFS no longer supporting 15, but this one's a surprise, maybe a surprise to you. So some features will not be usable if you do an upgrade versus a fresh installation. So what I mean by that is that some technologies on the old system are kind of incompatible with the new one, like Grub 2 versus, maybe not even using Grub at all on an older installation. I mentioned the Btrfs sub-volume layouts are changing a little bit because of transactional updates. You won't take that advantage because you do a fresh install and get the new, standard that we're going on. And by the way, that's something that's going to continue to evolve over time. We're going to do more and more there. The XFS file format, on this file format, that changed over time as well. So if it was formatted early on, you're going to miss those features, things like that, the root file system, encryption, etc., things like that. And then if the speed of your upgrade is actually really, really important for you, then updating RPMs actually takes longer than a fresh installation, believe it or not. That's because of all the calculation that has to be done on all the package comparisons and everything else. Okay, so some other fresh installation considerations, some of these we've talked about. So we generally recommend skipping when you're jumping from, like, say, SLES 8 to 12 or 8 to 15. Yeah, that's time for a fresh installation. It's less true when you're just skipping one or two major versions. In fact, there are some scenarios where we'll allow you to support that. But in general, if you're doing a major version upgrade, especially going like 11 to 12 or 11 to 15, probably time to strongly consider a fresh installation. Here you're guaranteed, as we just talked about in the last slide, all features are usable because they're current and new, and you're doing everything from scratch, okay? Things like the RiserFS and the Btrfs transactional updates I just talked about. But also, this is an opportunity for fresh installations to do things differently. So don't forget that. That can be actually pretty important, especially if you're doing new software versions of packages on top of the distribution, some independent software vendor applications you're putting on stuff on top. And again, no old stuff is left behind in this case. So is that good or is that bad? I question that because it's good because you're more secure, but it's bad because you're going to have to install that application from scratch, and you're going to have to go through that process, and there may be a change or not. And plus, you may not have been around. It may not be well documented, so you might be considered easier just to do an in-place upgrade and it all just continues to work. Well, it may or may not. Make sure you do your testing on that. All right, which is really what I'm talking about here, is that if you are going to do a completely fresh installation, you definitely want to make sure you're doing some testing, okay? Now, here's one big advantage of a fresh installation, and that's this idea of a simplified abort rollback blue-green approach. So what this means is you can leave your old server alone, turn it off for a little while, do all your testing, and just point everything to the new server, and everything's great. Then move on, just retire your old server. If not, you always have a place to go back. I just caution you when you do your testing on that if you're doing some third-party applications on top or independent software vendor software on top and it touches a shared database that may be shared between the old and the new, the blue and the green, be a little careful there. Make sure you do your homework to make sure that it's going to be safe to do that. Or use the rsync -r to test and retest until you're certain that you're in good shape before you actually do that. But that's an important aspect, important role for you, especially if you're doing bare metal hardware type of upgrade processes. Okay, now, no matter what, though, if you're doing a fresh installation, hopefully you got that documentation we talked about. You are going to have to manually configure everything and start from scratch. Kind of everybody, stating the obvious here, but still kind of note that. Okay, now, this last bullet item I'm going to leave for a little bit later, but the modules and packages change. I mentioned that earlier, and it's kind of important, but I'll show you some really cool features to address that as well. Okay, so again, upgrade or fresh installation, and your target is going to SLES 15 SP1, which is the current. SP2 maybe if you do this later in the year. So if there's going to be some more slides in here that I'm going to talk about in the next section here just shortly. But if you're on SLES 11 or older, I generally recommend, even though there are ways and paths for you to upgrade, to just go ahead and do a fresh installation. I think it's going to be less of a headache for you, and it's going to look nice and clean. You get all the features, you get all the best of everything in that particular case. One caveat here is if you're on SLES 12 SP2 or later, you're good for an in-place upgrade. If you are not, then if you install, for example, SLES 12 GA, there were some initial hiccups, and I kind of talked about that where Btrfs had some growing pains in the early days. But you're actually usually pretty good unless you started doing things that weren't supported in our distribution. That's where a lot of our customers got. They got real excited about some of the other things that are in Btrfs that that were not ready for prime time, and they got themselves in trouble and got a black eye in Btrfs. But we don't have customers like that anymore, okay? And then the two hardware items that we talked about before, 32-bit to 64-bit. And by the way, if you'd like to automate a 32-bit to a SLUZ 12 or 15 64-bit implementation on a new bare metal hardware, or even otherwise, our consulting has helped customers automate that using things like SUSE Manager. So now also in the power of the big Indian, little Indian, we talked about that before. Okay, so now you've decided I'm leaning towards doing an upgrade. So how do I do that? What's that going to look like? So our upgrade paths and methods that are available to you is, first of all, they fall into two general processes, online and offline. Online means that the server is actually up and running when you do your upgrade. Now that's limited to support pack upgrades only. You're not going to do a major upgrade in this particular case, major 11 to 12, for example. For that, you're going to need offline. And to do offline, you're going to basically boot the server into the installer or to AutoYast or using SUSE Manager, or, we'll get into details of that, okay? Now, what are the paths I can take? What can I take if I have it, and what can I do to get to SP12, SLE 12 SP5? Well, you could start with SLUZ 11, but you'll have to be on SP4. You could go from multiple iterations of SLUZ 12 previous to that. Notice there's kind of a disjointed here where we have LTSS available for SLUZ 12, but not for SLUZ 11. Well, why is that? That's actually because of when the screenshot was taken. This screenshot is actually right from our documentation. At the time, SLUZ 11 SP4 was still under general support and LTSS wasn't there. So it is supported. Don't worry, you can still do that. In fact, the general rule of thumb is just make sure that your version is under support, either LTSS, SPOS, or general support, and then you'll be able to do that upgrade. And in the next support pack, you should see, well, there won't be one for SLUZ 12, but for like in SLUZ 15, you'll see something similar. Now here you can see there's actually a lot more options for your upgrade paths. And again, we've got SLUZ 11 and SLUZ 12 that you can go either to 15 or 15 SP1. This matrix will change a little bit with 15 SP2. But just like I had mentioned before, LTSS and SP5 for SLUZ 12 is not listed here because of the timing. But that's the only reason it's not there. Is if you're under those, then you're fine. We will still be able to upgrade them. And then there's this really neat one. So if you're using Leap for development, or you have application developers, or for whatever reasons, there's actually a direct upgrade path for you to get to SLUZ 15 as well. And that should change in SLUZ 15 SP2 as well. So keep an eye out for that. Okay, so just to kind of reiterate what we just kind of went through on the pictures, here's the bulleted version of it. So major version upgrades, as long as you're still within general or LTSS support, you're in good shape. So you can do that. You have offline, online migrations. Offline, again, you're going to be booting. These are all the options that you have. Booting from a DVD, a physical DVD, an ISO image, a USB stick, across the network, using AutoYast in conjunction with that, what have you. Online migration is not supported for the major version, as we talked about before. And then you can use SUSE Manager as well. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's going to basically leverage AutoYast. Minor versions or support packs, here are some links, some more links for you to click on, 15 or 12. And then with the online migration, it's a little bit different process that you have available to you. The zipper migration mechanism, or ZipperDup, is a little more heavy-handed, but basically does a lot of overwriting for you. That's available to you as well. And then beyond the blue-green, you do still, if you went from a SLUZ 12 and had Btrfs, you have an automatic built-in rollback capability with Snapper and Btrfs there too, okay? And then the offline migration we talked about before. Now, I mentioned SUSE Manager, and I'll give you a little bit more hints at the end of the session today, but SUSE Manager will let you do automate your upgrades of your major versions, 11 to 12, 11 to 15, or the support pack releases as well. Basically, it's going to be giving you mass upgrades using AutoYast. And if you are a one-man shop and have greater than 20 servers, it's probably a good idea to consider SUSE Manager. You can automate it, and this can scale up to thousands. No, you don't have to do thousands all at once. You can actually do one server at a time or somewhere in between as well, whatever is going to fit fit your needs, you can group things into doing that. And of course, LTSS upgrades, even though they weren't on that screenshot before, they are available as well. Okay. Now, to do a network installation, there are a variety of resources available to you that I'll talk a little bit more a little bit later, but this here is really just a reference slide for you to click on the information that you may be of interest to you to process and take one of these paths for each and every one of these. So click on each of those links. Okay. Now, you may be in a situation where a lot of our retail customers might be, where, for example, you might have a lot of point-of-sale devices in stores or malls. Hopefully, those will be back open soon. And in those cases, they have to be updated as well, but they have very poor bandwidth or no bandwidth at all in those cases. So here's an idea where you can basically take an upgrade server in a box, if you will, and take a mobile SMTRMT server or a SUSE Manager server, ship it out to the site, have somebody plug it in with some instructions, or have a tech go out there and plug everything in, set it up. And then you have a couple of options from there. Once you have that, basically you're bringing the internet to your servers instead in order to do your upgrade. And so here you have two options. You can do a two-step method or a one-step. The two-step method is mentioned here. So this is where you can, it's a media-only upgrade, for example, or an update via that mobile SMTRMT or SUSE Manager server. And then the media upgrade today in 15SP1 is actually 2 DVDs. It's our default DVDs that we have. You know, they're not patched. They're not to today current, right? And there's two. There's an installer and then there's a packages DVD. You're going to need both of those in this particular case. Or in SP2, waiting for that, there's going to be a single ISO again, so watch out for that. But there's ways that in that previous slide that I gave you 2 slides ago, I think, it'll let you build your own, and so you can build your own gold master of this. So you can actually build up a custom of this and patch it. And that's actually talked about here because you can do it one step. The other step was 2-step because you're going to upgrade the server and then it's got to be patched. And it's going to talk to your SMTRMT server across the network, even though local, but it's still a 2-step process. Here, 1-step is to build that gold DVD ISO and then do it with the DVD, or you can do this with SUSE Manager built in. If you need to do this without SUSE Manager, then again, here are some links that you can use to do that. And you'll have to combine those 2 DVDs we talked about for SLES 15 with SP1, SP2, you won't have to do that. Okay, cloud deployments. Now, nobody's doing those, right? I don't, highly unlikely. But just in case. If you're going from SLES 11 to 12, your time is running out. So at the end of May, the old really difficult process is going away. That's the good news. The bad news is it's going away at the end of May. So you're probably going to be doing a new instance, either pay-as-you-go or on-demand, and starting over from there. Otherwise, once you get to 12 and you're on a current one, then there's a new distribution migration method announced with SLES 12 SP4, and there are the links that you can go into get some details about it. Much, much easier, much smoother, and a lot better than what we had before, but it's going to be the way going forward. By the way, that method is only available for cloud deployments. If you want to learn more about how SUSE Manager can help you manage your cloud deployment or your hybrid IT with cloud and on-prem, bare metal, or virtualized, either one, then here's a good session at SUSECon that you can join to get more information about that. Okay, upgrade and migration processes and tips. So here, this is a you know, the who's who of webinars and technical detail. Choose the one that's going to match your particular path. And I strongly encourage you to check these out. These are mostly videos and webinars that you can get access to today. Okay, check those out. Now, if SLES 15 is your goal, we talked about this a little bit again. I'm going to recommend a fresh installation. If you're on SLES 11, if you're on an older one, then yes, again, don't want anything more than one hop. 2-hop version is SLES 11. Again, I mentioned the SLES 12 aspect, so it bears repeating here. SLES 12 SP2 or later is a really good candidate for an upgrade or a fresh installation, but an upgrade will be really good. And then keep in mind, of course, that you do have the option to go from SLES 12 up to SP1 in various mechanisms, and including SLES 11, actually, if you recall from our graphic earlier. But keep in mind, regardless of what you're doing here, that if you're going for SLES 12, it's going to end by 2024 for your general support, so you're going to want to get this done by then. So maybe you want to wait for SP2 or maybe not. I'll leave that up to you, of course. Now, before you actually start your upgrade, your last step in preparation is read the release notes. And I don't mean just the release notes of, let's say, 15 SP2, read 15 SP2, 15 SP1, and GA, and all of them in between, because there are some things that might get superseded by the last one, but there's some good reminders, tips, tricks, and things that are not different. They're just, they're actually included. The next section, pretty obvious. You guys know those. We kind of talked about this as well. Use this as a checklist for yourself. And then if you do have to back up and you're not doing snapshots or virtualization of that sort of thing, make sure you test your backup. Definitely have had some folks kind of get in trouble with that. It's like, oh, we have a backup and the backup failed. It wouldn't restore properly, what have you. So make sure if you're going to use that mechanism that you do that. And I'm not referring to what's built into YAST, because that's only going to do, the backup tool there is only going to back up your configuration files. It'll help you rebuild from scratch, but it's still going to be, kind of a nightmare for you to do that. Also, if you're using PAM LDAP and what you're doing today, I suggest you migrate up to SST before you upgrade. You don't have to do that, but it's just going to make your life a lot easier. Okay, some more tips specifically around the upgrade process. If you're on a virtual machine, shut it down. Don't suspend it and do your upgrade. Earlier on, I had mentioned if, database is part of the distribution, so MySQL, MariaDB, DB, and Postgres. Well, these are the click on these links in here and they'll take you to the information about it. But the big one I want you to call attention to is make sure that if you're on SLES 11, you're on Postgres 9 before you upgrade to 12 or 15. And then you can upgrade to Postgres 10 as part of that. Now, I talked twice, I think, about the modules and the extensions and packages and how things are kind of parsed out a little bit differently in SLES 15. There's a couple of links for you to reference, but also this command here. This zipper-s search packages, that is going to be at a command line a key to that. However, you see that URL? I've got a GUI version for you to get the same information. And this is a screenshot from that very utility. So there's the URL again. But if you look, you choose the version of SUSE Linux Enterprise Server you want, and you type in the RPM that you're interested in. And then if you look to the right there, it says in module, it says all modules. Well, all the modules that we'll search are all the modules that are included with SLES 15. These are all the modules that are available for SLES 15. And the ones that I've highlighted here are the ones that you're probably going to want to enable when you're doing your fresh installations or upgrades until you know for sure or you do your homework to find out. But more than likely, these are all the ones that you're going to want to have at least enabled during a fresh install or an upgrade process. There's another one I'll call attention to. I won't talk about here, but it's called Package Hub. So if you're doing any other operating or ISV, no, not ISV software, but well, maybe open source software that's out there, there are tens of thousands, I think over 60 or 70,000 packages for SLES 15 are available there. It'll make your support lifecycle a little bit easier, give you peace of mind as well. Click that link, check them out. It's really quick, short read and the FAQ and everything in there. And it's got a lot of value in it. And it's available for 12 as well, by the way, but it's just there's a lot more content out there for SLES 15. Okay, so if you're going to be doing that upgrade, go back to that again, go back to the details. Make sure you upgrade your RMT server if you're using RMT. If you're using SMT, the same is true there. Specifically, I know in RMT that there were some fixes that we did there, so make sure you do that. Orphaned packages, click on that link. It's going to tell you that. It's going to identify those for you if you do your upgrade process. And then there are configuration changes. So the .rpm new, .rpm save files are all there, and there's a command for you to find out what those are so that you know what's going to be different when you do your upgrade. And you may have to kind of massage in one direction or the other with those configuration files. Okay? And then if you want to unregister some of those modules, you can click that link below. Now, I mentioned that I would quickly talk about SUSE Manager, so real quick plug in here for SUSE Manager. Basically, SUSE Manager, what it's going to do is it's going to create gold image channels for you so that you can upgrade your servers all to a specific set of patch revs, and then it will automatically allow you to schedule them, reboot those servers, and off you go. Automate your entire upgrade processes, okay? And the way that looks is here. So the way it works, first of all, is it will send this kernel option to auto upgrade equals 1, telling the server what to do after you actually schedule it to do an upgrade. And then you can do this for one server or a group of servers and whatever you have. And this is all based on the channel that you mint and say, this is gold, this is what I want all my servers to be. Keeps them all nice and consistent. Whereas in the other mechanisms, if you're going up to SUSE Customer Center, every day it could be a different build and every server might be slightly different. Okay, so that's pretty much everything we've got. I've got, like I mentioned, a few slides I'll just kind of run through here for you that you can take a look at. Download the presentation and you'll get access to that. I want to thank you. That's all we have for today, but hopefully you'll go check out some of those other SUSECon digital sessions, and then hopefully we'll actually get to see you in person next year. Thank you very much.